When you're a legend, you expect that it's going to be a long time back. I think that goes with the territory, doesn't it? Born here at the Alexandria Hospital on Duke Street. We lived up on Braddock Road, up in Braddock Heights. I went to George Mason Elementary School through the 6th grade, and then my parents transferred me to St. Agnes School for Girls. So I graduated from St. Agnes in 1966. So we just had our 50th class reunion. So that gives you an idea of how legendary I am. Well, when I grew up in Alexandria, it was definitely a sleepy suburban town. People say to me now, oh, it must have been really fun to grow up in Alexandria. I'm like, not really, because King Street as we know it, and Old Town as we know it today, didn't exist in my childhood. There were 1 or 2 restaurants, but mostly it was still warehouses and hardware. King Street was a lot of shoe stores. We never sort of understood how much commerce there could be in shoes, but there were a lot of shoe stores and all. So then, as through the years, as I grew up, things began to change, and Old Town became more of a place to be. And those of us who were here then attribute all of that to liquor by the drink in Virginia. I mean, because honestly, the restaurants couldn't make a go of it until that came through. And when that came through, it just sort of opened everything up. And Alexandria changed into the sort of vibrant downtown community that it is now. But the thing I like about Alexandria is that there are different parts of Alexandria. If you want to be in the urban part of Alexandria, you can choose to be there. If you still want to have a little bit of the suburban flavor of what Alexandria was like back in the 50s and 60s, you can live in Beverly Hills or, Seminary Hill areas where it is still a suburban community, albeit with lots of traffic. But so it sort of combines the best of both worlds to me. But it definitely has changed into a much busier, more congested. When I was at the Masonic Temple for an event a few months ago, and they let us go up to the roof. And I looked over at where Carlisle is and all of that, and I thought, you don't often get that perspective from the ground level. And I thought, oh my gosh, my city has changed in a way that even I can't really visualize on a day-to-day driving by it. But looking at it from above, it's like, wow, this is a busy place. I think it has changed a little bit. It's a little less insular than it was back in the 60s. New people have come and brought new ideas and new thoughts, and that's a good thing. Because we used to say in Alexandria that there were about 100 people who really lived here. Because wherever you went, you'd see the same people, and you sort of didn't see all the rest of the people who did live here, but you didn't know them. But now it's a better mix, and you see more people, and so I think it's made a difference in our community. It isn't the small, sleepy little southern suburban town that it used to be, and I embrace that. Both of my parents were active volunteers in Alexandria, and as I later came to find out as an adult, some of the things I've done, actually, my grandfather did and my father did, and so I didn't even know it as I was doing them. But when I came back to Alexandria after being away to go to college in New Orleans for 4 years, a friend of mine who's a little bit older than I got me involved in the Junior Friends of the Campagna Center. At the time, it was the Y. It was the Alexandria Y. Then it became the Alexandria Community Y, and ultimately it became the Campagna Center in honor of Elizabeth Ann Campagna. So that was really my first introduction to me as a volunteer doing something. And I tell people I feel so lucky because so many people didn't get to know Elizabeth Ann Campagna. But I got to know Elizabeth Ann Campagna quite well. And those of us who knew her and loved her often say she was the Mother Teresa of Alexandria. And she could get you to do anything she wanted you to do. She would take you in a room, and when our sons were young, and she got me in her office, and she said, now, I want you to be in charge of the Christmas walk, the big Scottish Christmas walk parade next year. And I said, oh my gosh, that's so flattering that you would ask me, but I really have hardly done anything on the walk yet, and I have 2 small children, and they need me, and so I don't think I can give that much time. And in the way that only Elizabeth Ann Campagna could do, she looked at me and she said, I want to explain something to you. She goes, your children, by virtue of an accident of birth, are going to be fine in life. They have every advantage because they have good parents, and they're going to be fine. But there are hundreds and hundreds of children in this community who don't have that advantage, and they need you to step up and do the work that will allow them to become a peer of your children. And so I think you need to rethink your priorities and understand that you were born to do this. I said, oh, I'll be glad to chair the Christmas walk. So I actually chaired it for 2 years in a row. So that was the power of Elizabeth Ann Campagna. So I would say that she sort of got me thinking, well, that's right. I should give back to the community that I'm from, my father's from, my grandmother's from. Try to leave it a little bit better when I leave than when I came. And so that's how I got started. And the funny thing about being a volunteer is when you volunteer, you get jobs that no one would ever in a million years hire you for because you don't have on paper the qualifications to do it. But when a nonprofit needs help and they can't afford to pay for someone to do it, they often will convince a volunteer that you're capable of doing it. And then you do it and you find out, well, gosh, I could do that. And so to me, it's been a very rewarding experience of getting to do lots of different kind of things. Sometimes I think people think volunteering is, you're going to be licking envelopes or putting stamps on letters, and I have better things to do than that. But it's not at all about that. And if you want to advance in the volunteer world, you can be doing things, as I say, that you never dreamed you could do or that somebody would ask you to do. I've been fortunate to have a lot of one-on-one interaction with people in addition to having the board service and that kind of thing. So for me, I've enjoyed the mix of both doing board work, which is necessary for the governance of a nonprofit to help them navigate the waters, so to speak, but also I've been fortunate to have volunteer experiences that allowed me to interact one-on-one with people. And so you get a different perspective. I was a volunteer early on with the Red Cross Friendly Visitor Program, which is now run by Senior Services of Alexandria. And so I was paired with an elderly woman at Ladre, the senior high-rise run by the Housing Authority. And I would go there each week and talk to her about her life. And it was an eye-opening experience to hear her talk about the life that she had led, which was so different from the life I had led, just by, again, basically an accident of birth. I was born into a fortunate family. She was not. I got a good education. She did not. But between us, we had things in common that we found in common, and she would talk about growing up on a farm, and she could just remember it perfectly how it was. And on a hot day, she would go and pick a watermelon out of the field, and she and her brothers and sisters would sit and eat that watermelon. She goes, there's nothing better than a fresh picked watermelon. So I thought to myself, that's right. And she was homebound at Ladre, couldn't get out. So the next week I went to the farmer's market and I got a watermelon from one of the farmers, and I took it up to her apartment and we cut it up and we stood over her sink and we just ate that watermelon with the juice dripping down and spitting the seeds into her sink. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, I never thought I would taste this taste again." And I thought, well, that's worth it all right there. And it was such an easy thing to do. But had I not been in that program, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to experience that. So I think for people that are, hesitant about volunteering, if you open yourself up to the opportunity, you'll be quite surprised at what comes out of you and what you learn from other people. And I feel the same way about my work with the CASA program, the Court-Appointed Special Advocate for Abused and Neglected Children. And it's tough work. You see kids that are in terrible situations and are heartbroken. But then, you go through the process and you go through the court process, and sometimes the only alternative might be adoption. And so one of my cases a number of years ago was a little boy, and finally the parents' rights were terminated and the foster mother got to adopt this little boy. And I can still remember standing in Steve Rideout's courtroom on adoption day, and that little boy was in an electric blue little suit with a tie, and that foster mother was there, and she came up to me and she goes, "Oh, I never ever thought this day would come, and I thank you so much for all you did to make it possible for me to start my life with this precious little boy." And so it's moments like that that you think, gosh, I am so lucky, and this has been a wonderful ride for me. And as I say, I've met all kinds of people, all ages of people that I never would have just met if I had just stayed in my house or done something. I have been exposed to fun young people, wonderful people who at the time were older than I am, but of course now, being a legend, I'm the older person, so what goes around comes around. So anyway, it's been, there have been a lot of moments that have been special. I think if I had to say, and this was not through an organized program, but as you may know, my family had the opportunity to sort of foster a young man who was going to T.C. Williams High School, and we had known him as a small boy. He was friends with one of our sons. And over the years, he kept coming over to our house and staying around. And finally, when he was in high school, and it turned out he was a pretty good basketball player. And so he had a family situation that was not ideal. And so I finally said to him one day, I think you have a chance to go to college playing basketball, but you're going to have to really study. You're going to have to make yourself available to coaches, and I think maybe that could happen if you were willing to come live with us for the next few years so that we could help you through this process, because it's going to be a tough process and he said, okay, I think that'd be good. So he came to live with us, and we experienced all the ups and downs of basketball at the high school level, and then the recruiting level, and finally, ultimately, he was recruited by Georgetown, and went to Georgetown University, graduated from Georgetown University, and so I think, you know, you can't go through life thinking you can save the world, because if you think you can save the world, you'll be disappointed, I think, in the end. But if one person to one person, you can make that difference, I don't think there's any feeling like it. And Damon and I are still in touch all the time, and he actually is planning to come to the event. He lives in Las Vegas, but he's going to fly in because he wanted to be here to see me get the award. So I think of all the things, our relationship, our entire family's relationship with Damon Jackson has been the most meaningful to all four of my family. I think you don't have to think that it's perhaps as all-consuming as it's been for me. I've been fortunate in my life in that I have had the ability to give back, and I do say it's a privilege because many people don't have the amount of time that I have had to give back. So people tend to think, oh, I can't do it because I have a big job and it's going to take too much time. But as I say, there are many programs and things that you can do to start your path to volunteering that you would find pretty easy to do. I mean, who doesn't have an hour a week to visit with a homebound senior and just get to know them? And that program, you know, is one-on-one so rewarding. So I try to say to people, again, don't think you have to give over your life to a volunteer commitment. You don't have to do what I have been fortunate to be able to do, in that my volunteering has sort of been my full-time job. In many ways, I think it would have been easier to have one job than to have multiple bosses all asking me to do different things. So people, you know, are a little afraid to take that plunge to volunteerism because they think, oh, once they get me, they'll never let me go. And that's not really true. You do have the ability to control what you're able to give. But I think if people start to give, you get the sense of, oh my gosh, this is really rewarding, perhaps more rewarding than the job that I'm paid to do, and it's a good complement to that. It gives me another view of life and other people's experiences that you don't just normally walk up on the street to someone and start talking to them and say, tell me about your life. But if you're put into a volunteer group with other people, people talk about their lives, and so I try with people to say, don't think you're going to get roped in forever. Just start and see what you like. There's so many opportunities in Alexandria for so many needy, worthy causes. And so think about what you like, what interests you, and then put yourself out there. Go ahead and call up the volunteer bureau or call up the nonprofit that you've heard about and say, I'm interested in volunteering. What could I do to help you? And you, as I say, you'll be quite surprised that whatever skills you don't think you have, you suddenly have when you're free. So I would just like to thank the Living Legends organization, I guess, for giving me this honor. And as I say, it is a mixed blessing, because now I have to face the fact that I am a legend, and I think you're only a legend if you're a certain age. So I accept that graciously, I hope, and am grateful to be recognized. But as I say, I have gotten a whole lot more out of all my volunteer experiences than I'm sure the people that I have worked with have gotten out of me. So it's been a mutually beneficial situation, and I'm not ready to stop, so I'm just keeping on, so.